If you had told me, a year ago, that I'd be sitting here, telling the world about the day I found 5 condoms in my husband's car, I would have laughed in your face. Not because I thought Charles was perfect. No, after 45 years of marriage, you know better than to believe in fairy tales. But because I thought I knew the man I'd built my life with. I thought I knew every wrinkle in his smile, every sigh in his sleep, every secret he'd ever had. Turns out, I was wrong. It was a Tuesday, the kind of muggy Georgia afternoon where the air feels thick enough to chew. I'd just come back from the grocery store, arms full of bags, sweat trickling down my back. Charles was supposed to be at the senior center, volunteering for the monthly bingo night, but his car was parked in the driveway, gleaming in the sun. That cherry red 1969 Chevy Impala, his pride and joy, the one he babied more than he ever babied me. I set the groceries down and went to check on him, thinking maybe he'd forgotten something. The house was quiet, too quiet. No TV blaring, no radio humming, no Charles humming along to old Motown hits. I called his name, but only Biscuit, our fat tabby, answered, winding around my ankles and meowing for food. That's when I noticed the keys on the kitchen counter. Charles never left his keys out. He was paranoid about losing them, always padding his pockets, checking twice before leaving the house. I picked them up, feeling a prickle of unease. Something was off. I walked out to the car, the heat hitting me like a wall. I opened the driver's side door, the leather seats burning my thighs through my skirt. The car smelled like Charles, aftershave, old coffee, a hint of motor oil. I glanced around, looking for any sign of what he might have forgotten. That's when I saw it, the glove compartment, slightly ajar. I reached over and pulled it open. Out tumbled a small, square package. Then another. And another. 5 in total, all unopened, all gleaming in the sunlight. 5 condoms, lying there on the cream-colored leather like a slap in the face. My heart stopped. My ears started ringing. I stared at those little foil packets, my mind racing. Charles and I hadn't needed condoms since Michael was born, and that was more than 40 years ago. After complications with the delivery, the doctor said no more children, and Charles had taken care of that permanently. So why did my 70-year-old husband have condoms in his glove compartment? I sat there, frozen, the world spinning around me. I thought of all the late nights, the new cologne, the mysterious phone calls. The way he'd started dressing better, losing weight, paying more attention to his hair. I told myself it was just retirement boredom, a man trying to recapture his youth. But now, staring at those condoms, I knew the truth. I felt a wave of nausea, hot and bitter. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something, anything. But instead, I did what Southern women have done for generations when faced with a crisis. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and started thinking. I picked up one of the condoms, turning it over in my hand. The packaging was smooth, the lettering bold. I thought about all the times I'd trusted Charles, all the times I'd believed his stories. I thought about the years I'd spent making his favorite meals, washing his clothes, tending his garden, loving him with everything I had. And I thought about how easily he'd lied to me. That's when the idea hit me. It was petty, maybe even a little crazy, but it was mine. I went back into the house, grabbed the pepper grinder from the spice rack, and returned to the car. I opened each condom packet just enough to sprinkle a generous amount of black pepper inside, then sealed them back up as best I could. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. If Charles wanted to play games, I was going to play, too. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it, closed the glove compartment, and locked the car. Then I went inside, fed Biscuit, and started making dinner. I didn't say a word when Charles came home an hour later, whistling like nothing was wrong. I didn't mention the condoms, the pepper, or the fact that I knew everything. Instead, I waited. The next few days passed in a blur. Charles acted normal, too normal. He kissed me on the cheek, asked about my book club, even offered to help with the dishes. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he avoided meeting my eyes. I watched him, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It happened on Friday night. Charles said he was going out with the guys, a last-minute poker game at Jim's place. I smiled, wished him luck, and watched as he grabbed his keys and headed out the door. I waited until I heard the Impala roar to life, then sat down at the kitchen table, my heart pounding. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening for the sound of Charles's return. He came home late, stumbling through the door, his face pale and sweaty. He barely looked at me as he mumbled something about losing at cards and went straight to the bathroom. I waited until I heard the shower running, then got up and checked his phone. Nothing unusual, just the usual texts from Jim and Bernie. But I knew. I knew what had happened. And I knew it was only the beginning. The next morning, Charles was quiet at breakfast. He barely touched his eggs, pushing them around the plate with his fork, his eyes fixed on the table. I watched him over the rim of my coffee cup, waiting for him to say something, anything. But he just grunted when I asked if he was feeling all right and left the house early, claiming he had errands to run. I spent the day in a strange state of calm. There was a storm inside me, but on the outside, I was the picture of composure. I watered the hydrangeas, swept the porch, and called my sister Judy in Savannah. I didn't tell her what I'd done, at least, not yet. Instead, I asked about her grandkids, listened to her gossip about the neighbors, and let her laughter soothe me. Sometimes, you need to hear a familiar voice to remind you who you are. By noon, the Georgia sun was high and hot, and I decided to treat myself to lunch at the little cafe downtown. I sat by the window, watching people come and go, wondering how many of them were living with secrets as big as mine. I thought about Charles, about the woman he must be seeing, about the lies he'd told and the life we'd built together. I wondered if he was with her right now, if he was suffering the consequences of my little trick. When I got home, Charles's car was gone. I went inside, fed Biscuit, and sat down with my book. But I couldn't focus. My mind kept drifting back to the condoms, the pepper, the look on Charles's face when he came home last night. I wondered if he'd figured it out, if he suspected me. I wondered if he was angry, embarrassed, or just confused. That evening, Charles came home later than usual. He looked tired, his shirt wrinkled, his hair mussed. He barely said a word as he dropped his keys on the counter and headed straight for the shower. I listened to the water running, the sound of him moving around in the bathroom, and felt a strange sense of satisfaction. He was off balance, unsettled, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had the upper hand. After dinner, I sat on the porch, sipping sweet tea and watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. Charles joined me, sitting in his usual chair, but he didn't say much. He stared out at the yard, his hands folded in his lap, his mind clearly elsewhere. I let the silence stretch between us, comfortable in a way I hadn't been in a long time. Finally, he spoke. "Helly, do you ever think about what life would be like if things were different?" I looked at him, surprised by the question. "Different how?" He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "I don't know. Just different. Maybe if we'd moved to California with Michael, or if I'd taken that job in Chicago. Sometimes I wonder if we made the right choices." I studied him, searching for the man I'd married all those years ago. "We did the best we could, Charles. Life isn't about perfect choices. It's about making the most of what you have." He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. He was wrestling with something, and I had a pretty good idea what it was. That night, I lay in bed, listening to Charles's breathing, thinking about the years we'd spent together. I thought about the good times, the laughter, the love, the quiet moments of contentment. I thought about the bad times, the arguments, the disappointments, the betrayals. I wondered if it was possible to forgive, to move forward, to rebuild what had been broken. The next day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called Letitia Burns, an old friend from my teaching days whose daughter, Shanice, was now a private investigator. I told her I needed to talk, that it was urgent. She didn't ask questions, just told me to come by her office that afternoon. When I arrived, Shanice greeted me with a warm smile and a cup of coffee. She listened as I told her everything, The condoms, the pepper, the late nights, the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She took notes, asked questions, and promised to look into it. "I'll get you answers, Helen," she said, her voice steady and reassuring. "You deserve to know the truth." I left her office feeling lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was doing something, taking control of my life instead of just reacting to what Charles did. That evening, Charles was even more withdrawn. He barely touched his dinner, claiming he wasn't hungry. He spent most of the night in his recliner, watching TV with the volume turned up too loud. I watched him from the kitchen, wondering what was going through his mind. Before bed, I checked his phone again. Still nothing unusual. But I knew better than to trust appearances. Charles was careful, but he wasn't as clever as he thought. As I lay in bed, I thought about what would happen next. I knew the truth would come out, one way or another. I just hoped I was ready for it. The following morning, I woke up before dawn, the house still and silent except for the soft purring of Biscuit curled at my feet. I lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the woman I'd become. I was no longer the naive bride who believed love could conquer anything, nor the middle-aged mother who put everyone else's needs before her own. I was someone new, someone who had been hurt, yes, but who was also learning to fight back. Charles left early again, mumbling something about a meeting at the senior center. I watched him go, noting the stiffness in his walk, the way he winced as he bent to tie his shoes. I wondered if the pepper had done its work, if he was still feeling the after-effects. I almost felt sorry for him, almost. After he left, I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window at the garden. The hydrangeas were in full bloom, their blue and purple blossoms a riot of color against the green lawn. I thought about all the years I'd spent tending that garden, coaxing life from the soil, nurturing beauty in a world that could be so harsh. It struck me that marriage was a lot like gardening. Sometimes you had to pull up the weeds, even if it hurt. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Shanice. "Helen, I've got something for you," she said. "Can you come by the office?" My heart pounded as I drove across town, my mind racing with possibilities. When I arrived, Shanice greeted me with a serious expression. She handed me a manila envelope, thick with photos and printouts. "I followed Charles yesterday," she said. "He didn't go to the senior center. He drove to a house in Buckhead. He was there for almost 3 hours. I got pictures of him going in and out, and of a woman who lives there. Her name is Elizabeth Patterson. She's married to a doctor, but from what I can tell, she and Charles have been seeing each other for months." I flipped through the photos, my hands trembling. There was Charles, standing on the porch of a beautiful Tudor-style home, his arm around a woman with blonde hair and expensive taste. There were pictures of them at a cafe, laughing over coffee, and of Charles carrying shopping bags behind her at the mall. The intimacy between them was unmistakable. "I also found some financial records," Shanice continued. "Charles has been moving money into a separate account. Small amounts, nothing that would raise red flags, but it adds up. He's planning something, Helen." I sat there, numb, the weight of the evidence pressing down on me. I'd suspected, of course, but seeing it in black and white was something else entirely. I felt a strange mix of anger, relief, and sadness. Anger that Charles had betrayed me so thoroughly. Relief that I wasn't crazy, that my instincts had been right. And sadness for the life I thought I had, the marriage I thought was real. "What do you want to do?" Shanice asked gently. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I want him to know that I know. But I want to do it on my terms." She nodded, understanding. "You let me know if you need anything else." I drove home in a daze, the envelope clutched in my lap. When I got home, I sat at the kitchen table and spread out the photos, the printouts, the evidence of Charles's double life. I stared at them for a long time, letting the reality sink in. That evening, Charles came home later than usual. He looked tired, his face drawn, his eyes shadowed. He barely spoke during dinner, pushing his food around the plate, lost in thought. I watched him, wondering if he could feel the shift in the air, the change in me. After dinner, I cleared the table and washed the dishes, my mind working overtime. I thought about all the ways I could confront him, shouting, crying, throwing the evidence in his face. But none of that felt right. I wanted him to feel what I felt. The shock, the betrayal, the humiliation. I wanted him to know that I was no longer the woman he could lie to, the woman who would forgive and forget. That night, as Charles slept beside me, I lay awake, planning my next move. I thought about the anniversary party Marge was helping me organize, the one Charles thought was a surprise for him. I thought about the friends and neighbors who would be there, the people who believed in our perfect marriage. I thought about the look on Charles's face when he realized the truth. I smiled to myself, a small, secret smile. If Charles wanted to play games, I was going to show him how the game was really played. The next morning, I called Marge. I want to make a slideshow for the party, I said. Pictures from our life together, from the wedding to now. Can you help me put it together? Of course, honey, she said, her voice warm and enthusiastic. I'll come by this afternoon. When she arrived, I handed her a stack of photos, wedding pictures, family vacations, holidays, birthdays. But I kept the envelope from Shanice hidden, tucked away in my purse. That was for later. As Marge sorted through the photos, chatting about the good old days, I felt a pang of nostalgia. There had been good times, moments of real happiness. But those moments were gone now, replaced by something harder, sharper, more real. When Marge left, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty space where the photos had been. I thought about the woman I used to be, the woman who believed in love, in loyalty, in forever. I realized that she was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who was ready to fight for herself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. The days leading up to the anniversary party passed in a blur of preparation and quiet anticipation. I moved through the house like a woman possessed, cleaning, organizing, and making lists. I baked pies, arranged flowers, and called neighbors to confirm their attendance. On the outside, I was the perfect hostess, the devoted wife, the woman everyone admired. But inside, I was a storm waiting to break. Charles seemed oblivious to the tension simmering beneath the surface. He went about his routines, tinkering in the garage, watching baseball, and making small talk about the weather. He even brought me flowers one afternoon. Yellow roses, my favorite. I accepted them with a smile, tucking them into a vase on the kitchen table, but I couldn't help wondering if they were a peace offering or a distraction. At night, I lay awake, listening to the sound of Charles's breathing, thinking about the years we'd spent together. I thought about the promises we'd made, the dreams we'd shared, the life we'd built. I thought about the lies, the secrets, the betrayals. I wondered if it was possible to forgive, to move forward, to find happiness again. On Friday, the day before the party, I met with Shanice one last time. She handed me a USB drive with digital copies of all the evidence, photos, emails, financial records. Are you sure you want to go through with this? She asked, her eyes searching mine. I nodded, my resolve firm. He needs to know that I know. And everyone else needs to know too. She squeezed my hand, her grip warm and reassuring. You're stronger than you think, Helen. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the USB drive in my hand, and wrote out my speech for the party. I poured my heart onto the page, every word a testament to the pain and the strength that had brought me to this moment. I wrote about love and loss, about trust and betrayal, about the woman I used to be and the woman I was becoming. I wrote about the importance of standing up for yourself, of refusing to be a victim, of finding your voice even when it shakes. When I finished, I read the speech aloud, my voice trembling but strong. I imagined the faces of my friends and neighbors, the shock, the disbelief, the support. I imagined the look on Charles's face when he realized the truth. I felt a surge of power, a sense of liberation I hadn't felt in years. The morning of the party dawned bright and clear, the sky a brilliant blue, the air crisp and cool. I woke early, my heart pounding with a mix of nerves and excitement. I dressed carefully, choosing a blue dress that brought out the color of my eyes, and pinned my hair up in a neat bun. I put on my mother's pearl necklace, a reminder of the strength and resilience that ran in my family. As I moved through the house, making final preparations, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. I hardly recognized the woman staring back at me. Her eyes were clear, her posture straight, her expression calm and determined. I smiled, a real smile, and felt a wave of pride. Charles was unusually quiet that morning. He watched me with a mixture of curiosity and unease, as if sensing that something was different. He asked if I needed help, but I waved him off, telling him to relax and enjoy the day. "It's our anniversary after all," I said, my voice light. By noon, the house was filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation. Friends and neighbors arrived, bearing casseroles and bottles of wine, their faces alight with excitement. Marge bustled around, making sure everyone had a drink, while Judy set out plates of deviled eggs and slices of pie. Michael arrived just before 2, his arms full of gifts, his face beaming with pride. He hugged me tight, whispering, "You look beautiful, Mom." I squeezed his hand, grateful for his presence, for his support. As the afternoon wore on, the party moved outside to the backyard, where tables were set up under the shade of the old oak tree. The air was filled with the scent of barbecue and the sound of children playing. Charles mingled with the guests, laughing and telling stories, his charm on full display. But I could see the tension in his eyes, the way he glanced at me when he thought I wasn't looking. Finally, as the sun began to set, Marge called everyone together for the slideshow. The guests gathered around, their faces expectant, their glasses raised in a toast. I stood at the front of the crowd, the USB drive in my hand, my heart pounding. "Thank you all for being here today," I began, my voice steady. 45 years is a long time to spend with someone. It's a lifetime of memories, of laughter and tears, of joy and pain. Today, I want to share some of those memories with you. The slideshow began, images flickering across the screen, wedding photos, family vacations, holidays, birthdays. The crowd laughed and clapped, their faces alight with nostalgia. But as the final image faded, I took a deep breath and stepped forward. "There's one more thing I want to share," I said, my voice clear and strong. "Something I've learned in the past few weeks. Sometimes, the people we trust the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. But sometimes, that pain is what sets us free." The crowd fell silent, the air thick with anticipation. I could feel every eye on me, every breath held in suspense. Charles stood at the edge of the group, his smile frozen, his posture suddenly rigid. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in years, I saw not my husband, but a man who had made choices that had led us here. I reached for the poster board I'd hidden behind the table, the one Marge thought was for a memory lane display. With a steady hand, I turned it around, revealing the photos Shanice had given me. Charles and Elizabeth Patterson at the Buckhead house. Charles carrying shopping bags at the mall. Charles and Elizabeth, hand in hand at a quiet cafe. And most damning of all, Charles kissing her in his precious Chevy Impala. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Marge's hand flew to her mouth. Judy's eyes widened in shock. Michael stared at the photos, his face pale, his jaw clenched. The children stopped playing, sensing the shift in the air. I took a deep breath, my voice unwavering. For months, I wondered if I was imagining things. The late nights, the new cologne, the secret phone calls. I told myself I was being paranoid, that after 45 years, I should trust my husband. But trust, I've learned, is not a habit. It's a choice. And sometimes, it's a mistake. Charles stepped forward, his face flushed, his hands shaking. "Helen, what are you doing?" he hissed, his voice low and desperate. I met his gaze, my eyes steady. "I'm telling the truth, Charles. Something you should have done a long time ago." The crowd murmured, whispers spreading like wildfire. I could see the shock, the disbelief, the sympathy. But I didn't care. This wasn't about them. This was about me, about reclaiming my voice, my dignity, my life. I turned back to the crowd. I found 5 condoms in Charles's car last week. We haven't needed those in decades. I confronted him, not with words, but with action. I made sure he'd remember what it feels like to be betrayed, to be lied to be humiliated. A few people laughed nervously, unsure if I was joking. But I pressed on. I'm not telling you this to embarrass Charles, though he deserves it. I'm telling you this because too many women suffer in silence, believing they have to accept whatever scraps of love they're given. I'm here to say, you don't. You can stand up. You can fight back. You can choose yourself. Michael stepped forward, his voice trembling. Mom, are you okay? I smiled at him, my heart swelling with pride. I'm better than okay, sweetheart. I'm free. Charles tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He looked around, searching for support, but found only a wall of stunned faces. For the first time, he seemed truly alone. I turned to him, my voice soft but firm. You made your choices, Charles. Now you have to live with them. He opened his mouth, closed it, then turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped, his head bowed. The crowd parted to let him pass, their eyes following him as he disappeared into the house. For a moment, there was silence. Then Marge stepped forward, her eyes shining with tears. Helen, I had no idea. If you need anything at all, you just let me know. Judy hugged me, her arms strong and comforting. You did the right thing, sis. I'm proud of you. The guests began to murmur, some offering words of support, others simply shaking their heads in disbelief. I felt a wave of relief, a sense of closure. The truth was out. The burden was lifted. As the sun set, the party slowly wound down. Friends and neighbors hugged me, whispered words of encouragement, and promised to check in. Michael stayed behind, helping me clean up, his presence a balm to my wounded heart. When the last guest had gone, I sat on the porch, watching the fireflies flicker in the darkness. Michael joined me, his hand resting on mine. Are you really okay, Mom? He asked, his voice gentle. I nodded, tears slipping down my cheeks. I am now. For the first time in a long time, I feel like myself again. He squeezed my hand, his eyes shining with pride. You're the strongest woman I know. I smiled, feeling the truth of his words settle in my bones. I had survived the storm. I had faced the truth. And I had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to live life on my own terms. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the future. I didn't know what it would hold, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never let anyone make me feel small again. I would never settle for less than I deserved. I would never be afraid to speak my truth. And as I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace, a sense of hope, a sense of freedom. The next morning, the house felt different. Lighter somehow, as if a great weight had been lifted from the walls themselves. I woke to the sound of birds singing outside my window, the sun streaming in through the curtains. For the first time in years, I didn't feel dread in the pit of my stomach. I felt possibility. Charles was gone. I found a note on the kitchen table, written in his familiar, looping script. Helen, I'm staying at Bernie's for a while. I need time to think. I'm sorry. No apology could fix what he'd done, but I was oddly grateful for the space. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and let the quiet settle around me. Michael called mid-morning. How are you holding up, Mom? I smiled at the sound of his voice. I'm okay, sweetheart. Really. I think I needed this. I think I needed to remember who I am. He was silent for a moment. I'm proud of you, Mom. I know this isn't easy. It's not, I admitted. But it's necessary. After we hung up, I spent the day cleaning. Not just the usual dusting and vacuuming, but a real, deep clean. I went through closets, drawers, cabinets, sorting, tossing, reclaiming my space. I found old love letters from Charles, yellowed with age, tucked away in a shoebox at the back of the closet. I read them, tears streaming down my face, mourning the man I thought I'd married, the life I thought I'd had. But I didn't let myself wallow. I packed the letters away, along with wedding photos, anniversary cards, and other mementos of a life that was no longer mine. I wasn't erasing the past, just making room for the future. That afternoon, Marge stopped by with a casserole, chicken and rice, her specialty. She hugged me tight, her eyes brimming with sympathy. "You did the right thing, Helen. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." We sat on the porch, eating casserole and sipping sweet tea, watching the world go by. Marge told me stories about her own marriage, about the time she caught her husband flirting with a neighbor, about the years she spent pretending everything was fine. "It's never easy," she said, "but it's always worth it." After she left, I sat on the porch swing, the evening air cool against my skin. I thought about all the women like me, women who had given everything to their families, who had sacrificed their dreams, their happiness, their very selves for the sake of others. I thought about the strength it took to start over, to choose yourself, to say, enough. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I made a promise to myself. I would not let this be the end of my story. I would not let Charles's betrayal define me. I would build a new life, one filled with joy, with purpose, with love for myself, first and foremost. The days that followed were a blur of activity. I met with a lawyer, started the process of separating our finances, and began making plans for the future. I joined a book club, started volunteering at the local animal shelter, and signed up for a watercolor painting class at the community center. I filled my days with things that made me happy, things that reminded me of who I was before I became Charles's wife. Michael visited often, bringing groceries, fixing things around the house, and just sitting with me, talking about everything and nothing. We laughed, we cried, we healed together. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the fireflies, Michael turned to me, his expression serious. "Mom, do you think you'll ever forgive him?" I thought about it for a long moment. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe, someday. But forgiveness isn't about letting him off the hook. It's about letting myself move on." He nodded, understanding. "You deserve to be happy, Mom. Don't ever forget that." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. "I won't. Not this time." As the weeks turned into months, I found myself changing. I was stronger, more confident, more at peace. I learned to enjoy my own company, to find joy in the little things, a good book, a walk in the park, a cup of coffee on a quiet morning. I made new friends, reconnected with old ones, and discovered passions I'd long forgotten. I even started dating again, tentatively at first, then with more confidence. I met a kind man named Harold at my painting class, a widower with a gentle smile and a love of jazz. We went for coffee, then dinner, then a concert in the park. It was nothing serious, just two people enjoying each other's company, but it felt good. It felt right. Through it all, I never forgot what had brought me here, the pain, the betrayal, the heartbreak. But I also never forgot the lesson I'd learned. I was enough. I was worthy. I was whole, all on my own. And as I sat on the porch one evening, watching the stars twinkle in the night sky, I realized that I was finally, truly free. The seasons changed, and with them, so did I. Autumn arrived in Atlanta with a gentle chill, the leaves turning gold and crimson, carpeting the yard in color. I found myself looking forward to the small rituals of daily life, raking leaves, baking pumpkin bread, lighting a candle in the evening just because it made the house feel warm. There was a peace in the quiet, a comfort in the routines I chose for myself. Charles called a few times, mostly to discuss the logistics of the divorce. His voice was subdued, almost apologetic, but I kept our conversations brief and businesslike. I didn't need to hear his explanations or his regrets. I was done carrying the weight of his choices. One afternoon, as I was sorting through old boxes in the attic, I found a stack of letters from my mother. She'd written them to me when I first got married, full of advice and encouragement, little reminders to never lose yourself, no matter how much you love someone. I sat on the dusty floor, reading her words, feeling her presence wrap around me like a warm shawl. I realized how much I'd given up over the years, my dreams, my ambitions, even my sense of self, all in the name of being a good wife. But now, I was reclaiming those lost pieces. I started painting more, filling canvases with bold colors and wild shapes. I joined a walking group at the park, where I met women with stories like mine, some divorced, some widowed, all of them learning to live again. We laughed, we shared secrets, we cheered each other on. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged. Michael continued to be my rock. He called every week, visited when he could, and always made sure I knew I was loved. One Saturday, he brought his new girlfriend, a bright, kind woman named Tosha. We sat on the porch, drinking sweet tea and talking about everything from books to barbecue recipes. I watched Michael with Tosha, saw the way he looked at her, and felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he'd learned from our family's mistakes. The divorce was finalized in late October. I kept the house, the car, and a fair share of our savings. Charles moved into a small apartment across town, and word got around that things with Elizabeth Patterson had fizzled out. I heard through the grapevine that she'd gone back to her husband, and Charles was left alone, his double life in ruins. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate his misery. Instead, I felt a strange sense of closure. The man I'd loved for so many years was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. But I was still here. I was still standing. As Thanksgiving approached, I decided to host dinner for the first time in years. I invited Michael and Tosha, Marge and her husband, Judy and her grandkids, and a few friends from my walking group. I spent days preparing, roasting the turkey, baking pies, setting the table with my mother's china. The house was filled with laughter and the smell of good food, the kind of warmth I'd missed for so long. After dinner, as we sat around the table sharing stories, Marge raised her glass. "To Helen," she said, her eyes shining, "for showing us all what it means to be brave." Everyone toasted, and I felt tears prick my eyes. I looked around at the faces of the people who had stood by me, who had helped me find my way back to myself. I realized that family isn't just about blood. It's about love, about support, about choosing each other every day. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet again, I sat on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. I thought about the journey I'd been on, the heartbreak, the anger, the fear, and finally the freedom. I thought about the woman I'd become, the life I was building, the future that stretched out before me. I knew there would still be hard days, moments of doubt and loneliness. But I also knew that I was strong enough to face them. I had survived the worst, and I had come out the other side not just intact, but transformed. As the wind rustled the leaves and the moon rose high in the sky, I whispered a quiet thank you to my mother, to my friends, to myself. For the courage to let go, for the strength to start over, for the wisdom to know that I deserved more. And as I closed my eyes, breathing in the cool night air, I felt a sense of peace settle over me, a peace I had earned, a peace I would never again take for granted. Winter crept into Atlanta with a hush, the first frost dusting the lawns and the air turning sharp and clean. I found myself enjoying the cold, bundling up in scarves and gloves for my morning walks, feeling the sting of the wind on my cheeks. There was something invigorating about it, a reminder that I was alive, that I could still feel, still change, still grow. The holidays were different that year. For the first time in decades, I didn't have to worry about Charles's moods or his endless complaints about the decorations or the food. I decorated the house exactly how I wanted, white lights on the porch, a tree in every room, candles in the windows. I baked cookies and delivered them to neighbors, joined the church choir for the Christmas concert, and even volunteered at the soup kitchen on Christmas Eve. Michael and Tosha spent Christmas morning with me, bringing gifts and laughter and the kind of easy joy I'd almost forgotten existed. We made cinnamon rolls from scratch, watched old movies, and played board games by the fire. I gave Michael a painting I'd done of the old house, the one he grew up in, and he hugged me so tight I thought I might cry. After they left, I sat by the window, watching the snow fall softly outside. I thought about all the Christmases past, some happy, some not, and realized that I was finally making new memories, ones that belonged to me alone. In January, I started taking yoga classes at the community center. At first, I felt awkward and out of place, my body stiff and uncooperative. But the instructor was patient, and the other women were welcoming. We laughed at our mistakes, celebrated our progress, and cheered each other on. I found strength in my body I didn't know I had, and with it, a new sense of confidence. Harold and I continued to see each other, our friendship deepening with each passing week. We went to art exhibits, tried new restaurants, and spent long afternoons exploring the city. He told me stories about his late wife, about his years in the Navy, about the dreams he still hoped to chase. I listened, shared my own stories, and found comfort in the gentle rhythm of our conversations. One evening, as we walked along the river, Harold took my hand. "Helen," he said, his voice soft, "I know we're both a little battered by life, but I'd like to see where this goes. No pressure, no expectations. Just, let's see what happens." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "I'd like that, Harold. I really would." As winter gave way to spring, I felt myself blossoming alongside the daffodils and tulips in my garden. I painted more, filling my home with color and light. I hosted book club meetings, potluck dinners, and movie nights. My house became a gathering place, a haven for friends old and new. One afternoon, as I was pruning the rose bushes, Charles showed up unannounced. He looked older, thinner, his eyes shadowed with regret. He stood on the porch, hat in hand, shifting from foot to foot like a boy caught in a lie. "Can we talk, Helen?" he asked, his voice tentative. I hesitated, then nodded, leading him to the kitchen. We sat at the table, the same table where we'd shared thousands of meals, thousands of conversations. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "I wanted to apologize," Charles said finally. "For everything. For the lies, the betrayal, the pain I caused you. I know I can't undo what I did, but I needed you to hear it from me." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the man I'd loved, the man I'd lost, the man he'd become. I felt a surge of sadness, but also relief. "Thank you, Charles. I appreciate it. But I've moved on. I hope you can too." He nodded, his shoulders sagging. "I'm trying. It's not easy. Nothing worth doing ever is," I said gently. He stood to leave, pausing at the door. "You look happy, Helen. Happier than I've seen you in years." "I am," I said and meant it. After he left, I sat in the quiet, letting the moment wash over me. I felt no anger, no bitterness, just a sense of closure, of peace. I had forgiven Charles, not for his sake, but for mine. I was free. That spring, I traveled to the Grand Canyon, a trip I'd always dreamed of but never dared to take. I stood at the edge of that vast, breathtaking chasm, the wind whipping through my hair, and felt small in the best possible way. My problems, my heartbreak, my fears, all of it seemed insignificant against the backdrop of something so ancient, so enduring. I took a helicopter ride over the canyon, laughing with delight as we soared above the red rocks and winding river. I hiked the trails, made friends with fellow travelers, and filled my sketchbook with drawings of the landscape. I felt alive, adventurous, unstoppable. When I returned home, I brought with me a new sense of purpose. I started volunteering at the local women's shelter, sharing my story with others who were struggling to find their way. I listened, offered advice, and reminded them that it's never too late to start over. And as the days grew longer and the world burst into bloom, I knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be, living, loving, and thriving on my own terms. Summer arrived in a blaze of heat and color, the air thick with the scent of honeysuckle and freshly cut grass. My days settled into a new, joyful rhythm. I woke early, savoring the quiet before the world stirred, and took long walks through the neighborhood, greeting neighbors and watching the sun rise over the rooftops. I tended my garden, coaxing tomatoes and peppers from the earth, and filled vases with zinnias and sunflowers for every room in the house. Harold and I spent more time together, our friendship blossoming into something deeper. We went to outdoor concerts, picnicked in the park, and took weekend trips to the mountains. He made me laugh, made me think, made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in years. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people enjoying each other's company, discovering the simple pleasures of companionship. One Saturday, we drove out to a small town festival, wandering through booths of handmade crafts and sampling peach ice cream. As we sat on a bench beneath a shady oak, Harold turned to me, his eyes warm and earnest. "Helen, I know we've both been through a lot. I don't want to move too fast, but I'd like to see where this goes. Would you?" I smiled, feeling a flutter of excitement. "Yes, Harold, I would." We held hands as we walked back to the car, the world feeling wide open and full of possibility. Meanwhile, my friendships with the women in my walking group deepened. We shared our stories, of love and loss, of heartbreak and healing. We celebrated birthdays, supported each other through doctor's appointments and family troubles, and cheered each other on as we tried new things. I realized that I was part of a community, a sisterhood of women who had survived and thrived, who had learned to find joy in the everyday. Michael and Tosha announced their engagement in July. They invited me to dinner at their favorite restaurant, and as I watched them together, so in love, so hopeful, I felt a surge of pride and gratitude. Michael had learned from my mistakes, from my pain. He treated Tosha with kindness and respect, and I knew their marriage would be built on a foundation of honesty and trust. The wedding was set for the following spring, and I threw myself into helping with the preparations. I went dress shopping with Tosha, tasted cakes, and helped choose flowers. It was a joy to be included, to be part of something new and beautiful. One afternoon, as we sat in the shade of the porch, Tosha turned to me, her eyes shining. "Helen, thank you for welcoming me into your family. I know things haven't been easy, but you've made me feel at home." I squeezed her hand, my heart full. "You are home, Tosha. We're lucky to have you." As the summer wore on, I found myself reflecting on the journey I'd taken, the heartbreak, the anger, the fear, and finally, the freedom. I thought about the woman I'd been, the woman I'd become, and the woman I was still becoming. I realized that life is a series of chapters, each one building on the last, each one offering new lessons, new opportunities, new joys. I started writing again, filling notebooks with stories and memories, hopes and dreams. I wrote about my marriage, my divorce, my new life. I wrote about the women I'd met, the friendships I'd forged, the love I'd found. I wrote about the pain and the healing, the loss and the renewal. And as I wrote, I felt a sense of clarity, a sense of purpose. One evening, as I sat on the porch swing, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight, I realized that I was happy. Truly, deeply happy. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had learned to find beauty in the imperfections, to embrace the messiness of life, to celebrate the small victories. I thought about Charles, about the life we'd shared, the love we'd lost. I felt no anger, no bitterness, just a quiet gratitude for the lessons learned, for the strength gained, for the freedom found. As the stars appeared overhead, I whispered a prayer of thanks, for the second chances, for the new beginnings, for the courage to keep moving forward. And as I closed my eyes, breathing in the warm summer air, I knew that my story was far from over. There were still adventures to be had, still dreams to chase, still love to give and receive. I was ready for whatever came next. As the days grew shorter and the first hints of autumn crept back into the air, I found myself reflecting on how much my world had changed in just a year. The pain of betrayal had faded, replaced by a quiet confidence and a sense of self I hadn't felt since I was a young woman. I was no longer defined by my marriage, my heartbreak, or even my survival. I was defined by the choices I made every day, to be kind, to be brave, to be true to myself. Harold and I continued to grow closer. We took a weekend trip to Charleston, wandering the cobblestone streets, eating shrimp and grits at a little cafe by the water, and laughing until our sides hurt. One evening, as we watched the sun set over the harbor, Harold took my hand and said, "Helen, I never thought I'd find happiness again after losing my wife. But you've shown me that it's possible. Thank you for giving me a second chance. I squeezed his hand, my heart full. You've given me one too, Harold. I'm grateful every day. Back home, I threw myself into preparations for Michael and Tosha's wedding. I helped Tosha pick out her dress, design the invitations, and even learned how to make her favorite lemon bars for the bridal shower. The house was filled with laughter, with friends and family coming and going, with the joyful chaos of new beginnings. One afternoon, as I was arranging flowers for the shower, Charles called. His voice was hesitant, almost shy. Helen, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. I know I hurt you, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I listened, feeling a wave of compassion for the man I'd once loved. Thank you, Charles. I hope you find peace. He was quiet for a moment. You sound happy. I am, I said, and realized it was true. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet, letting the moment settle. I felt no anger, no sadness, just a sense of closure, of release. I had forgiven Charles, not for his sake, but for mine. I was free to move forward, to embrace the life I was building. The wedding was a beautiful, joyful affair. Michael and Tosha exchanged vows under a canopy of oak trees, their faces radiant with love. I watched them, tears streaming down my cheeks, and felt a surge of pride. They were starting their life together with honesty, with respect, with a commitment to each other that I knew would endure. After the ceremony, as we danced under the stars, Michael pulled me close. Thank you, Mom. For everything. For showing me what it means to be strong, to be brave, to love without losing yourself. I hugged him tight, my heart overflowing. You make me proud every day, Michael. I love you. As the night wore on and the guests drifted away, I sat on the porch swing, watching the moon rise over the trees. Harold joined me, his arm warm around my shoulders. We sat in comfortable silence, listening to the crickets, feeling the peace of a life well lived. I never thought I'd have this again, I said softly. Love, family, happiness. Harold smiled, kissing my forehead. You deserve it, Helen. We both do. In the weeks that followed, I settled into a new routine. I continued volunteering at the women's shelter, sharing my story with others, offering hope and encouragement. I painted, I wrote, I spent time with friends. I traveled, exploring new places, meeting new people, embracing every opportunity that came my way. One day, as I was walking through the park, I ran into Marge. She hugged me, her eyes shining. Helen, you're glowing. I've never seen you so happy. I laughed, feeling the truth of her words. I am happy, Marge. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. She squeezed my hand. You inspire all of us, you know. You showed us that it's never too late to start over, to find joy, to choose yourself. I smiled, feeling a sense of pride and gratitude. I had come a long way from the woman who found 5 condoms in her husband's car, from the woman who had been betrayed, who had suffered, who had doubted her own worth. I was stronger, wiser, and more alive than I'd ever been. As the leaves turned gold and the air grew crisp, I looked forward to the future with hope and excitement. I knew there would still be challenges, still be moments of doubt and fear. But I also knew that I was capable of facing them, of overcoming them, of thriving in spite of them. I was no longer defined by my past, by my pain, by the choices of others. I was defined by my own strength, my own resilience, my own capacity for love and joy. And as I stood on the porch, watching the world change around me, I knew that my story was far from over. There were still adventures to be had, still dreams to chase, still love to give and receive. I was ready for whatever came next. The first frost of November sparkled on the grass as I woke to a new day, the world outside my window painted in silver and blue. I wrapped myself in a soft robe and padded to the kitchen, the house quiet except for the gentle hum of the heater. I brewed a cup of coffee, savoring the warmth between my hands, and watched the sun rise over the garden I'd tended for so many years. The roses were sleeping now, their blooms gone, but I knew they'd return in the spring, stronger, brighter, more beautiful than before. That morning, I sat at my desk and opened my journal, the pages already filled with stories of heartbreak and healing, of endings and new beginnings. I wrote about the woman I'd become, about the lessons I'd learned, about the hope that had taken root in my heart. I wrote about forgiveness, not just for Charles, but for myself. For all the times I'd doubted my worth, for all the years I'd put others first, for all the moments I'd been afraid to speak my truth. I wrote about Harold, about the gentle way he held my hand, about the laughter we shared, about the quiet comfort of his presence. I wrote about Michael and Tosha, about the family we were building, about the love that bound us together. I wrote about Marge and Judy and the women in my walking group, about the strength we found in each other, about the joy of friendship and community. As I wrote, I realized that my story was not just mine. It was the story of every woman who had ever been betrayed, who had ever lost herself in the service of others, who had ever found the courage to start over. It was a story of resilience, of hope, of the unbreakable spirit that lives in all of us. That afternoon, I met Harold at the park for a picnic. We sat beneath a canopy of golden leaves, sharing sandwiches and stories, watching children play on the swings. He looked at me, his eyes full of affection. "Helen, do you ever regret any of it? The pain, the struggle, the choices you made?" I thought for a moment, then shook my head. "No, Harold, I don't. Every step, every stumble, every heartbreak led me here. To this moment. To you. To the life I have now." He smiled, squeezing my hand. "I feel the same way." We walked along the river, the water sparkling in the late afternoon sun. I felt light, unburdened, free. I knew there would still be hard days, still be moments of doubt and fear. But I also knew that I was strong enough to face them, that I was surrounded by love and support, that I was exactly where I was meant to be. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude, for the second chances, for the new beginnings, for the courage to keep moving forward. I knew that my story would continue, that there were still adventures to be had, still dreams to chase, still love to give and receive. That night, as I sat on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket, I looked up at the stars and felt a sense of peace settle over me. I thought about the journey I'd taken, about the woman I'd become, about the life I was living. I knew that I was enough, that I was worthy, that I was whole, all on my own. And as I closed my eyes, breathing in the cool night air, I made a promise to myself, to keep living, to keep loving, to keep choosing joy, no matter what. If you've listened to my story and it touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to find your strength after betrayal? Have you ever started over when you thought it was too late? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you want to support more stories like this, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and helps keep these stories alive for others who need them. Thank you for being part of my journey, even if just for a little while. Remember, it's never too late to choose yourself. With love and hope. Helen.